If you've ever loved someone who seems to push you away the closer you get, you already know the ache of trying to hold on while they're always halfway out the door. Avoidants don't trust easily, not because they don't want to love, but because they're terrified of what love has always meant to them: loss, judgment, suffocation, or control. They learned early on that love was dangerous. That intimacy cost them their safety, and now they run from the very thing they crave the most. So, how do you love someone like that? You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't plead. You show up as a love that doesn't invade, doesn't corner, doesn't punish. The only kind of love an avoidant will ever trust is safe love. That's the love that says, I see you even when you pull away. I care even when you go quiet. I won't punish you for needing space, but I won't shrink myself to earn your crumbs either. Safe love is built on boundaries, not ultimatums. On consistency, not intensity. On respect, not rescue. It's a love that offers closeness, not control. If you truly want an avoidant to trust your love, you have to be the calm in their emotional storm, not the storm itself. But here's the truth that many people miss. You cannot force someone to heal. You cannot convince someone to be ready. Your job is not to fix them. Your job is to honor yourself while inviting them into a relationship that feels safe enough to stay. Sometimes they will lean in. Sometimes they will run. But if your love is patient, grounded, and full of self-respect, not desperation, then even the most avoidant person will stop and think, maybe this kind of love is different. And if they don't, then maybe your lesson wasn't to change them, but to finally choose yourself. Because the only love an avoidant will ever trust is the love that never tries to trap them, only welcomes them to stay. Avoidants fear intimacy not because they are cold, unfeeling, or incapable of love, but because somewhere along the line, love became associated with pain. It wasn't safe. It wasn't stable. It wasn't something they could count on. Instead, it may have been filled with conditions, unpredictability, or emotional neglect. For many people with avoidant attachment tendencies, early emotional experiences taught them that closeness equaled vulnerability, and vulnerability equaled danger. That's not a conscious belief they carry around, but it shows up in how they behave. When someone gets too close, they flinch. When emotional expectations start to rise, they shut down or pull away. It's not because they don't care. It's because they care so much that the possibility of losing themselves or being emotionally exposed feels overwhelming. For an avoidant, intimacy can feel like a trap. Love, to them, often feels like something that demands too much, asks them to surrender too deeply, or pushes them to give what they're not sure they can offer. Maybe growing up when they needed someone emotionally, that person wasn't available, or perhaps love came with strings attached, conditional on behavior, performance, or silence. So now, when love appears again, it carries echoes of those early disappointments. They begin to associate closeness with a kind of quiet panic. That panic tells them you're going to lose yourself, or they're going to hurt you, or worse, you're going to disappoint them. That's why they value distance. Not because they want to hurt their partner, but because distance feels like the only way to stay safe. This doesn't mean they don't want connection. Most avoidants do. In fact, they often crave deep love more than they even admit to themselves. But they've learned to protect themselves by keeping a piece of their heart just out of reach. The moment someone tries to get too close, their nervous system flares up. Suddenly, small things feel like huge threats. A simple emotional need from a partner might trigger fear or resentment. They might think, "Why are you asking so much from me?" Or, "I need space before I lose myself." What they're really saying is, "This feels dangerous. I don't know how to hold this without losing the fragile balance I have." They also fear being seen too clearly. For someone who's used to hiding their deeper emotions, intimacy threatens to uncover parts of themselves they've long kept buried, insecurities, weaknesses, past wounds. To be seen in love is to be vulnerable, and for the avoidant, vulnerability equals risk. So they might push away the very person they love, not because they don't value them, but because they fear what being fully open might cost them. It's not uncommon for avoidants to sabotage good relationships without fully understanding why. A fight starts over something minor, a pattern of withdrawal sets in, or they begin to doubt the relationship, not because it's bad, but because it's getting too real. This fear of intimacy is often misread. Partners think they're being rejected, that the avoidant doesn't love them, or that they're doing something wrong. But in truth, the avoidant is often locked in a silent war with their own heart. They want love, but they want it from a distance they can control. The closer love gets, the more it threatens that control. So they stay in the middle, never fully out, never fully in. It's a painful way to live, both for them and the person who loves them. But understanding this fear and where it comes from is the first step to approaching them with empathy instead of judgment. Because avoidants don't fear love itself. They fear the kind of love that costs them their emotional safety. The only love an avoidant will ever trust is the kind that feels emotionally safe. Safety, to them, is everything. It's not about grand romantic gestures or intense declarations of love. It's about knowing that the connection won't demand too much, too fast, or at the wrong moments. To the avoidant, love that rushes in, overwhelms, or clings too tightly triggers a reflex to back away. What they crave is a love that respects their boundaries, honors their independence, and never threatens to consume their sense of control. It's the calm, consistent presence of someone who sees them clearly and still gives them space to breathe. That's the only kind of love they can begin to trust, because it doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like permission to be exactly who they are. Many people try to win over an avoidant partner with intensity, more closeness, more attention, more pursuit. But this strategy often backfires. The avoidant doesn't interpret intensity as love. They interpret it as demand, as a sign that their autonomy is under threat. They begin to feel suffocated, even if the other person's intentions are pure. So they shut down. They create emotional distance. They withdraw into themselves, not to punish their partner, but to protect their own sense of safety. And once that safety is threatened, even unintentionally, it takes a long time to rebuild trust. For an avoidant to feel safe, they need to know they won't be emotionally punished for needing space. They need to believe that love doesn't come with strings attached, that their silence won't be met with ultimatums, and that their hesitations won't be seen as flaws to fix. Safety isn't just about what is done, it's about what isn't done. It's about what you choose not to say in moments of tension. It's about restraint. It's about allowing silence without assuming rejection, about allowing space without taking it personally. That kind of emotional maturity builds trust slowly over time. Avoidants are hyper-aware of expectations. The moment they feel someone leaning too hard on them for emotional reassurance or demanding vulnerability on a timeline, they retreat. They want to open up, but only when it feels natural and unforced. They want to feel that the relationship is a safe place where they won't be criticized for the way they protect themselves. And they want to know that if they do let someone in, they won't be manipulated or emotionally cornered later for doing so. Safety means freedom. It means they are allowed to have their guard up until they're ready to lower it. And when they do lower it, it needs to feel like a choice, not a compliance. The avoidant can sense emotional pressure the way a flame senses wind. Too much and it flickers out. That's why emotionally safe love is quiet but steady. It's the kind of love that says, I don't need you to change, but I'm here if you want to. It doesn't chase, but it doesn't vanish either. It's consistent, predictable in the best way. It doesn't use drama or games to create closeness. It relies on trust earned moment by moment. Safe love doesn't ask the avoidant to become someone they're not. It invites them to show up, even if that process is slow, imperfect, or guarded. And ironically, it's that very lack of pressure, the sense that they're free to come and go emotionally, that allows them to begin stepping forward. When an avoidant feels emotionally safe, something subtle begins to shift. They soften. They test the waters of intimacy, maybe in small ways at first. They say something slightly more vulnerable. They reach out instead of pulling back. They take the risk of being seen. And they only do this because they feel that the love they're stepping into won't punish them for it. That's why emotional safety isn't just nice to have, it's the foundation for everything. Without it, the avoidant will always keep their distance, no matter how deep the connection seems. But with it, trust can begin to grow, and from trust, true intimacy can finally take root. Safe love for the avoidant type is never loud or forceful. It doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and certainly doesn't try to prove its worth through desperation. Instead, it shows up quietly, consistently, and with dignity. When you're in love with someone who fears closeness, your instinct may be to lean in harder the moment they pull away. But the avoidant doesn't experience that leaning in as comforting. They experience it as pressure. They feel overwhelmed, cornered, and emotionally smothered, so they pull back even more. It becomes a painful cycle, one person reaching, the other retreating, and the more that cycle plays out, the more trust is eroded. The only thing that ever truly calms this storm is consistency without pressure, showing care without needing to be validated constantly in return. An avoidant person doesn't want to be chased, not because they don't want love, but because chasing implies a kind of emotional chasing too, a constant pursuit to get them to open up, to commit, to respond the way we want them to. And that pursuit feels like danger to them. What they trust instead is calm presence, love that doesn't panic when they need space, love that doesn't explode when they take a step back, love that doesn't emotionally spiral when a message goes unanswered or a day goes by without closeness. To an avoidant, consistency is not about frequency, it's about steadiness. It's about knowing that when they do step forward again, they will be met with warmth, not punishment, understanding, not accusations. They trust the people who can hold space without losing themselves in the process. Avoidants are constantly scanning for signs that love will cost them their independence. When they see a partner who is constantly seeking reassurance, over-explaining, or panicking in response to emotional distance, it makes them feel responsible for someone else's emotional state. And that's terrifying. They aren't trying to hurt their partner by being distant, they're trying to protect themselves. But if they feel like they're also carrying the burden of someone else's emotional reactions, they will feel the need to withdraw even more. That's why it's so important to manage your own reactions in the presence of avoidant behavior, not for them, but for yourself. Because no relationship will ever be safe if you're constantly trying to force it to become what you need through effort alone. You don't build connection with an avoidant by doing more. You build it by doing less, but doing it with clarity and confidence, reaching out occasionally without expectation, letting them know you care without demanding anything in return, creating space for silence without assigning it meaning, and most importantly, continuing to live your life without allowing their distance to define your worth. Avoidants learn to trust the people who stay emotionally grounded, the ones who don't make their love conditional on performance or emotional output, the ones who allow space for the relationship to breathe without turning that space into a threat. This doesn't mean you accept breadcrumbs or suppress your needs. On the contrary, it means you know how to express your needs clearly, but without urgency. You know how to stand in your own emotional center so you aren't constantly thrown off balance by their behavior. And when an avoidant sees that, it disrupts their pattern. It shows them something they're not used to, a love that doesn't push or pull, a love that isn't fragile, a love that doesn't turn to chaos when things don't go according to plan. That's the kind of love that an avoidant slowly begins to approach. Not because they were chased, but because they were met with presence and self-respect. That combination is rare. Most people either pursue relentlessly or detach completely. But the sweet spot, the place that actually builds trust, is where someone can remain emotionally available without being emotionally demanding. That's the love that makes an avoidant feel safe enough to stay close. Not because they were pulled in, but because they finally feel free to choose connection on their own terms. True love for an avoidant doesn't come in the form of intense pursuit or emotional sacrifice. It comes in the form of healthy boundaries, a calm emotional presence, and a quiet refusal to abandon self-worth in exchange for connection. When someone has avoidant tendencies, they are often on high alert for signs that their independence is being threatened. The moment they sense emotional neediness, codependency, or pressure to fulfill someone else's expectations, their instinct is to create space, even if they care deeply. That's why it's not love rooted in urgency or self-abandonment that reaches them. It's love rooted in grounded self-respect. Love that is not shaken by silence, distance, or a slow pace. Love that does not try to rescue, but simply stands firm. When we love an avoidant, we often think that giving more will unlock their heart. That being endlessly understanding, constantly available, and hyper attuned to their emotional unavailability will eventually lead them to change. But it doesn't work that way. When you abandon your own boundaries in an attempt to win someone over, you teach them that your needs are negotiable and that you will tolerate emotional distance indefinitely. This doesn't make them feel safer. It actually reinforces their pattern. They learn that they don't have to change because someone else is already doing the emotional heavy lifting. What builds trust instead is the ability to care deeply while also honoring yourself. to be loving and supportive without crossing the line into self-sacrifice. That kind of inner strength is what ultimately earns their respect. Avoidants are used to people trying to fix them, change them, or get them to open up on someone else's timeline. So when you come into the picture with emotional clarity, not control, when you express your truth without manipulation, it stands out. You can say, I care about you, and I also need consistency to feel connected, without turning it into a demand. You can say, I understand your need for space, and I also know what I need in a relationship without making them wrong for their coping style. These are boundaries, and they are the opposite of ultimatums. A boundary says, here's what I will accept for myself. An ultimatum says, you must change or else. One invites mutual respect, the other breeds fear. For someone with avoidant tendencies, the absence of emotional drama is what begins to feel like safety. They need to experience love that allows them to be exactly where they are without being punished for it. But they also need to know that you are not going to lose yourself in the process of loving them. That's the difference between holding space and being held hostage by someone's emotional patterns. If you constantly adjust your needs, your time, and your emotional rhythm to keep them comfortable, you're not building a relationship, you're building resentment. And eventually, that resentment spills over. What was once quiet patience turns into frustration, and the dynamic collapses under the weight of unmet needs. Being in a relationship with someone avoidant requires emotional strength, not the kind of strength that suppresses feelings or pretends everything is okay. The kind of strength that says, I'm willing to walk with you, but I won't walk away from myself. It's about remaining steady even when they pull back. It's about not making their distance mean something about your worth. And it's about having the courage to speak your truth, even if it means they walk away, because love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-abandonment dressed as devotion. And if they do begin to trust you, it won't be because you gave up everything for them. It will be because you didn't, because you respected yourself enough to stay whole. And in doing so, you showed them what real safety looks like. You can invite someone into a healthy, loving connection, but you cannot force them to be ready for it. No matter how patient, supportive, or emotionally available you are, readiness is an internal decision that only they can make. This is especially true for someone with avoidant attachment. They might deeply care for you, feel drawn to your presence, and even admire your emotional openness. But if they are not emotionally ready to face the discomfort that comes with real intimacy, they will keep pulling away. And that's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of the emotional work they haven't done yet. The mistake most people make is believing that if they just do enough, love harder, wait longer, hurt more quietly, the avoidant will eventually change. But healing isn't something you can hand to another person. It's a path they must choose for themselves. This is one of the hardest truths to accept when you love someone who keeps you at arm's length. You see their potential. You feel the glimpses of connection, of vulnerability, of the person they could be if only they stopped running. But those moments, as powerful as they are, don't mean they are ready. Many people confuse emotional intensity with emotional availability. Just because there are sparks or deep conversations or late night confessions doesn't mean the person is ready to sustain emotional closeness. In fact, those moments often terrify avoidants more than they comfort them. Because once they've shown a glimpse of their inner world, their fear kicks in. Now they feel exposed. And exposure to them feels dangerous. So they retreat again and again. This is where your own self-worth becomes non-negotiable. It's tempting to keep showing up, hoping that your consistency will eventually become the anchor they trust. And yes, being grounded and patient can sometimes soften their walls. But there is a line, an invisible point where your love for them begins to cost you your love for yourself. That's when staying becomes harmful. That's when waiting turns into self-denial. Choosing yourself doesn't mean giving up on them. It means refusing to betray your emotional needs in the hope that someone else will eventually meet them. It means saying, I see your pain, but I can't shrink to make you feel safe. What often happens in these relationships is an emotional erosion. Slowly, over time, you begin to silence your needs so you don't seem needy. You downplay your expectations so they don't feel pressured. You start to monitor your own emotional expression, thinking that if you're just low maintenance enough, They'll finally feel comfortable staying close. But in doing that, you lose your emotional voice. You stop being honest with yourself about what you truly want. You become a version of yourself that is tolerable for them, but unsatisfying for you. That's not love. That's emotional survival. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for both of you, is to walk away. Not in anger, not to teach them a lesson, but because your emotional needs deserve to be met without resistance. Because you deserve a love that meets you at the level you're offering it. And because their healing, if it's ever going to happen, has to be a choice they make without being rescued. When someone finally chooses to grow, it won't be because you begged. It will be because they were finally ready to face their own fear. Until then, all you can do is love with integrity, to love without losing yourself, to give without giving away your soul. And if that love isn't returned in the way you deserve, you must have the strength to walk away. Not because they failed you, but because you finally stopped failing yourself. At the end of the day, the only kind of love an avoidant will ever trust is one that doesn't try to force them to change, doesn't demand closeness on a clock, and doesn't come with emotional chaos. It's a love rooted in patience, in strength, and in quiet self-respect. It's a love that invites rather than invades, one that holds space without losing identity. And most importantly, it's a love that never forgets this truth: you can love someone deeply and still choose yourself when the connection becomes one-sided. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop trying to be chosen by someone who's still hiding from themselves. Because when you show up with real, safe love, and they're ready, they'll come closer. Not because you pulled them, but because they felt free enough to choose it. And if they don't, then you'll walk away not broken, but proud, knowing you offered the kind of love that even fear couldn't distort. That is your power. That is your freedom. Thank you for taking the time to listen, reflect, and sit with this message. If you've loved someone avoidant, or if you are avoidant yourself, this conversation isn't about blame. It's about understanding, healing, and choice. You deserve a love that doesn't exhaust you. You deserve a connection that doesn't leave you questioning your worth. You deserve to be met where you stand, whole, grounded, and honest. So thank you for being here, for opening your heart to this truth. Wherever you are on your journey, may you find the kind of love that doesn't just feel good, but feels safe. Take care of yourself. Choose peace. And remember, the right kind of love never asks you to disappear to keep it. Goodbye for now, and thank you again.